So I'm a sucker for gory 80s anime, spooky adventure games, giant monster sprites, and weird genre hybrids. So when I first stumbled across this game in my never-ending research on old horror games, my fascination soon followed. This is Ankoku Shinwa, Yamato Takeru Densetsu, also known in English as The Dark Myth. Ankoku Shinwa originated as a 7-chapter serial manga from Shonen Jump in 1976 by Daijiro Morohoshi, known for his work in sci-fi and horror comics like Yokai Hunter and the Mudmen, and he's still releasing works to this day, and has been cited as influencing famous directors like Hideaki Anno and Hayao Miyazaki. Despite a prolific manga career, Ankoku Shinwa would be the only one of his works to get a video game adaptation, or even an animated version, with a 2-episode animated OVA series in 1990, and the game releasing on MSX in 1988, with a quite similar port to Famicom in 1989. Now, I can't pretend that either of these anime or game adaptations are well regarded, for reasons we'll get into, but potentially of interest for intrepid explorers of jank, looking for an obscure, weird, and mysterious story steeped in dark folklore and mythology. So the premise surrounds a 13-year-old boy named Takeshi, haunted by the mysterious death of his father. Upon deeper investigations, he soon discovers he is a descendant of the legendary prince and folk hero Yamato Takeru, and destined to become the avatar for a powerful god if he can complete his spiritual journey and gain that divine power. The adventure becomes quite convoluted and messy from there in the abridged anime and game adaptations, especially so for Western audiences that might not be familiar with the various folklore references blended together here, but at the very least it gives off a mystical and somewhat archaeological vibe to everything, and even some cosmic horror Lovecraftian parallels can be observed here, like in much of Morohoshi's other works. The MSX and Famicom releases of Ankoku Shinwa were both developed by Zap, and published by Tokyo Shoseki, and as mentioned, seem quite similar to each other. I'll mainly be showing off the Famicom port today, thanks to it having an English fan translation, but it's worth mentioning the MSX version arguably has an ever so slight edge in graphics and music quality. Now, Zap at the time had a modest back catalog of MSX games under their belt since 1984, and they're also credited with some work on Azteca 2, which would go on to be westernized as Tombs and Treasure, another similar archaeological adventure game that would get released on Famicom and NES. Now, while Tombs and Treasure had a massive array of commands, Ankoku Shinwa has a more stripped down and minimal interface, limited to 6 action commands like move, use, speak, and so on, and a sprite-based inventory in the upper right, and a pretty cool journal progress indicator that helps you know if your decisions are putting you on the right track. Typical of adventure games of the time, there's a lot of trial and error of trying different things to keep the game moving along, sometimes resulting in your demise, although I wouldn't say it's as brutal as something like Shadowgate, where almost everything is out to kill you. The game's also split up into different chapters, so a death doesn't cause too much progress to be lost, and you can also obtain a password between chapters if you split up your play sessions on this one. And notably, at the end of each chapter is a boss fight, where the gameplay style switches to an action game, arming Takeshi with a projectile shooting sword and pitting you against some kind of giant monster in a very minimalistic dark room, which was likely a technical workaround to be able to handle the large sprites here. Your sword gradually improves throughout the game as well, so the weird lobbing shot you start out with will eventually become a much more useful spread shot attack, which is kind of a cool thing, but it also makes the game feel somewhat unbalanced as the bosses seem to just get easier as you get further in the game. Not that any of these action sequences are that hard anyway, it's fairly straightforward pattern recognition and exploiting safe spots for these fights. So yeah, these parts are a bit janky, but an interesting mix-up that you don't see in many adventure games at the time. And I thought some of the monsters were pretty awesome looking, and they cap off each chapter nicely. The game in total is fairly short, and with its fairly limited choices of actions available, it's somewhat unlikely to get super stuck on any of its puzzles. Your first playthrough might only take a couple of hours, which can actually be kind of great if you're not looking for a lengthy experience. The English translation patch out there is pretty decent, It uses rather basic and awkward language at times, but it's at least very functional to get you through the game. I can't really speak to its translation accuracy, but it seems like the confusing plot is not isolated to the game adaptation, as the anime OVAs have similar issues, perhaps even more so, as the 2 episodes are constantly rushing to dump lore on you and deprioritizing showing action that is actually happening. I still thought it was worth watching though, and perhaps helps clarify some of the events and themes of the game. The manga also has been translated to English, which I haven't read through entirely yet, but maybe that would be a better place to start if you wanted a more complete understanding of the overall vision being shared here. I'm definitely curious to dig more into Moro Hoshi's work now, and after this video, maybe some of you out there might like to at least give the game a shot. Again, it's by no means an amazing title, but undeniably interesting if you're into this sort of stuff, and I quite like the aesthetics and the moody soundtrack. At the least, you could also check out Tombs and Treasure for a similar but more complex and polished mystical adventure title of a similar ilk. Thanks so much for watching and supporting the channel, and we'll catch you next time.